every single person who walks into that building every single day is creating the culture. If everybody was all headed in the same direction, with the same vision of what they would like their experience at work to be day in and day out, including the bad times, because they just happen, the practice as a whole would move more intentionally forward towards that vision coming to fruition.
Hey everyone, thank you for joining me again. I really enjoyed putting this episode together. I'm so glad you tuned in. This is a good one. Dr. Jennifer Edwards joined me for this talk, and I'm not even sure how to really sum up what we talked about. Conscious leadership is probably the closest description, but yeah, we covered a lot in this episode. We dove into what it means to lead in a way that fosters lasting change, whether that's a change in your day-to-day protocols or a big change in the overall culture of your practice. And at least for me, when I think of implementing real change, whether it's in practice or just in my own life, sometimes it feels like this impossible, exhausting undertaking. And I think a lot of us can agree that holds especially true when we're thinking about making changes to create a practice culture that reflects the values that we hold as leaders. And I want to be clear here, when I say leader, I'm not necessarily referring to people in formal leadership positions. I mean, certainly I think this talk applies to those people as well, but anybody can be a leader in practice, which is one of the things we talk about here. So even if you're not in what I guess I'll call a formal leadership position, don't think that there's nothing in this episode for you. There absolutely is. Despite the inevitable challenges that creating and maintaining a practice culture that feels like it's in alignment with our vision, Dr. Edwards was really encouraging. For me, a key takeaway was the idea that leadership and lasting change is not necessarily a destination that I will eventually reach, but instead this continuous journey of growth and adaptation that should continue over the long haul. We also dove into why simply setting goals often isn't enough to set real change in motion, that achieving our vision requires honesty, self-reflection, commitment on a deep level in order to prioritize what's truly important. And I will wrap my comments up there with full acknowledgement that was a very oversimplified explanation of what we covered here. So definitely stick around and we'll dive deeper into some of these ideas. Let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Edwards and we'll get into it. Dr. Jennifer Edwards is a mindset and leadership coach with a passion for helping women and organizations transform their approach to leadership and life. After 13 years as a CEO and owner of a successful multi-million-dollar veterinary practice, she now specializes in helping other professionals navigate transitions and achieve extraordinary results. As an ICF credentialed coach, Jennifer uses her expertise to help businesses develop conscious leaders, foster cohesive teams, and build thriving cultures. Through coaching, consulting, workshops, and speaking engagements, she combines proven leadership strategies with energy management techniques, empowering those in leadership, and women in particular, to move from feeling overwhelmed to leading with purpose and fulfillment. And whether working one-on-one or with entire companies, she empowers those she works with to develop skills and the mindset needed for sustainable success and satisfaction, both personally and professionally. She was absolutely wonderful, so insightful. Let's go ahead and get into our episode.
Looking to protect your canine patients against parasites? Look no further than Simparica Trio, Serraline Moxidectin and Pyrantel chewable tablets. The first chewable to offer triple protection from heartworm disease, ticks and fleas, and roundworms and hookworms. It's also FDA approved to block infections that may cause Lyme disease by killing deer ticks.
Use with caution in dogs with a history of seizures. Serraline belongs to the isoxazoline class, which has been associated with neurologic adverse reactions. The most common side effects were vomiting and diarrhea.
Visit SimparicaTrioDVM.com for full prescribing information.
Well, I'm really excited and a little, intrigued on where we're going to go with this episode. I'm joined by Dr. Jennifer Edwards. I'm excited. Usually I start with this is what we're going to talk about. I don't even know. We have so many directions that we can go. And like I said, a little intrigued because when we hopped on, kind of our original call, just kind of a get to know you, I sort of ended up on the other side of the interview, and I was like, this is a whole new experience for me. But learned a lot, had a great conversation then, and I'm so excited to talk about it here. So Dr. Edwards, thank you so much for joining me.
Well, thank you for having me. And that conversation was amazing. So I'm excited to have another one.
Yeah, I felt the same way. Like I felt like I had this like free coaching session. It was kind of amazing. So yeah, I'm really excited to kind of bring another conversation to life. We sort of talked about workplace culture and how workplace culture it's just an essential part of any business. Certainly that applies, when we're talking about veterinary medicine. So I'm just going to stop there. And I'd love to just hear your comments on workplace culture.
Yeah, workplace culture is a really interesting concept for me. If you were to ask, 10 people, what does workplace culture mean for them? You'd probably get 10 different answers. And for me, what it means, like if I were to say, like, what is my definition of it? I would say it's an umbrella context under which a business performs, exists as far as their people are concerned. So it can include their methodologies, their philosophies, their ways of communicating or not communicating, even their methodologies. Especially in veterinary medicine, where methodology is such a big part of any practice because everybody does things differently, that to me all contributes to the experience of what we call culture.
That makes a lot of sense. And so in listening to that, I'm going, okay, absolutely, workplace culture and, kind of the way that we do things. But I think so many times when we think about culture, we can lay it out and it kind of becomes like the way we would like to believe we do things. And I'm certainly implicating myself here to say, I'm guilty of this as well. But things don't always kind of, I guess what we might envision as what we want our workplace culture to be might not always match up with the reality. So how do we kind of think about what can be discord between the ideal and the reality?
Yeah. So almost like there's a discrepancy between what people are experiencing and what the vision might be.
Right.
Yeah. So for me, nothing is ever about being perfect. It's about having a context to live inside of, almost like a default to which everything is compared. And from there, it's an intention. It's a way of kind of showing up at work. It's a way of interacting with either your colleagues or your superiors or people who work for you that is continually striving to head in a certain direction towards a specific vision, but never expecting to ever fully get there. It's kind of like a journey of self-discovery or a journey through life. You never quite arrive. That's why we call it a journey. So to me, workplace culture is the same. The question is, when there's that discrepancy, what are the discrepancies? How big are they? And why are they present? So are they present because the culture, and I put that in air quotes, really is just a bunch of lip service and it doesn't exist, nor does it try to exist? Or are there discrepancies because every person in the practice is a human, and humans, we do the things we do, and it's totally normal. And there's some things that just aren't working that need to be remedied, and everybody's on board trying to get there. Those are two very different situations under which a discrepancy might exist.
I feel like you just laid out such an important point, especially in a profession full of perfectionists where you say, if it's not perfect, then did I even do it? And almost this, like, the phrase false dichotomy comes to mind where it's not, if I haven't achieved it perfectly, then I'm not doing a good job. But there's also, it seems like this line of, I'm trying to think of the best way to say this. See, this is what happened in our original call. Like, it just gets my wheels turning. I'm like, but all these things I'm thinking about now.
That's great.
Yes. And it's because I've certainly experienced the lip service side of things where it's like, oh, yes, we're this way and it doesn't match up at all. But certainly I've experienced the other side of it too, of like wanting to make this change, but feeling like you're not quite getting there and you're kind of falling down in certain areas. And at least this might just be me speaking for myself, but it kind of feels like even if I'm falling into that category of I'm doing the best I can, I'm making headway, but I'm not quite getting there. Having like a bit of a perfectionist personality can put me in the mindset of, oh, this is just lip service. I'm not actually doing anything. And I think that's where it feels like that false dichotomy of like, it's not if you haven't achieved it, you haven't done anything. You can be working towards the goal, but you also have to be very honest with yourself and make sure that it's not just lip service and you really are working towards the goal. I don't know if any of that made sense.
That makes perfect sense. And let me just reflect that back to make sure I got what you're saying before I comment on it. So it's a situation where somebody might have good intentions and they have a vision that they want to create. It's not quite there yet. And being sure that that person, that leader, is actually behaving in ways and operating in ways consistent with getting to where they want to go, versus that it's almost like sabotaging themselves and saying,
Right.
am I actually working towards this, or am I just saying that I'm working towards this? And part of that is what's true in their own heart, and completely separate and totally disconnected from that is also how does it occur for the team, right? So sometimes you can have a leader who's really, quote, trying, and I put that in air quotes, and I can tell you, we can talk about that a whole separate conversation, but I think we have to have 20 conversations.
I'm for it. My wheels are already turning. And we're 5 minutes in. This is great.
Right. Exactly. So is the leader in her heart or his heart truly trying? And does the staff or the team perceive that that's occurring? Because the one thing that's so important to remember is that I love to point this out, workplace culture is not a thing, right? And when I owned my practice, I can't tell you how many people I interviewed that we would tell them about our practice and our culture and our philosophies, and they'd say, oh my gosh, this is amazing. This is exactly where I want to work because I really want to go someplace that has a good culture. Then they would come on board and be toxic, right?
Right.
And so culture is not a thing. You cannot go on Amazon, order workplace culture, and then have a fairy sprinkle it over the practice, and there you have it, right? Workplace culture is a sum of many ingredients all together, from leadership, which has probably a greater influence on culture, but it's also from the team. And I think very often, if a leader is frustrated, part of it could be things about themselves they need to work on, things they're not aware of. So maybe their behavior isn't consistent with what they want to achieve, and it might not be their fault. They just don't know. But at the same time, I sometimes, from my perception, see that there are certain team members that just sit back, proverbial arms crossed, waiting for this good culture to arrive and be like, you told me there was a good culture here and this sucks, and blah, blah, blah. And so without realizing that every single person who walks into that building every single day is creating the culture. The culture is created every single day, over and over and over. It is not a thing. It is not a static entity. It is dynamic, and it is an experience. Culture is nothing more than an experience. And then people describe the experience as the culture at work. So if everybody was all headed in the same direction, with the same vision of what they would like their experience at work to be day in and day out, including the bad times, because they just happen, the practice as a whole would move more intentionally forward towards that vision coming to fruition. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. And it's empowering to think of, really every single team member playing a role. I think it brings up some really important communication points when, communicating with team members of, this isn't something that one person can create. This is something that everybody needs to participate in. I also think it really reframes it from a leadership standpoint of, when we think about team members and how we are all working cohesively and, are we empowering people to have an influence over the way things are going? If we are seeing toxic behaviors or something like that, are there circumstances that are contributing to that in addition to individual personalities? And, where can we make adjustments there? It's a lot to consider. It can almost, at times it can feel sort of overwhelming of there, thinking of it as every individual person contributing, if you're, and I'm thinking about this from a leadership standpoint, but there's certainly many other ways to approach this. But it can sort of feel overwhelming to say, well, there's so much of this that's out of my control. And so how do I move forward and create the culture that I'm envisioning when I can't necessarily control how every single person is going to show up each day, if they're going to be consistent with what we have decided we want our culture to look like? How do you, I guess, what are your thoughts on kind of what may feel like overwhelm and loss of control when it comes to influencing, or even harder, adjusting workplace culture?
Yeah, there's so much in that. Like from just that bit that you just said, there's so many different factors to that from the way I see it. We cannot control the behavior of others, and never should it be expected that any one individual is going to show up to work every single day on their A game, perfect behavior, perfect attitude, perfect this, perfect that. That's part of the problem. One of the things that I used to coach my employees on when I had my practice was allowing people their humanity. So being able to have somebody in the building in a bad mood and have that actually be okay is actually part of a culture, right? So it's not about controlling people's behavior and having everybody show up every day in the perfect way. It's for me, it's more of an umbrella context of a culture where somebody can show up in a bad mood and not be on their A game and feel supported. And, I always like to say they feel that somebody has their back instead of they have to watch their back, right? And we all know that there's a lot of practices out there where day in and day out, people are watching their backs. They don't feel safe. So culture is, part of it is values of trust and safety and support and allowing people their humanity, allowing somebody to be going through a personal hard time for a while, maybe picking up the slack if they're absent-minded and they left a mess on the table after they put in an IV catheter or whatever. As I have done relief work even after my ownership, and I observe the teams, and I go places and it's amazing. Somebody leaves a mess on the table because they're running busy, and it's like somebody else swoops in right behind them and cleans it up. And they're like, sorry, I left the mess. Oh, no worries. We got it. Right. That to me is culture. So the person isn't behaving perfectly. They quote, left a mess. That's also part of the job. Whereas I see in other places where either everybody leaves the mess, I'm not cleaning up after her, or they clean up after her and then talk about her behind her back. So there's so much to creating culture. To me, my opinion, it needs to start at the top. However, it doesn't, like I said before, it does not end at the top. Leadership, and these days that can look like an owner and a manager, can look like corporate, a medical director, manager, department leads, whatever the structure of a practice is. Leadership is where it needs to start. The old saying, it all rolls downhill, right? So the good and the bad and the stinky. So leadership needs to be on the same page. The vision, the definition of what that culture is to be needs to be clear. It needs to be defined, and it needs to be agreed upon. Now, here's a key component. They can have it all written down. It can even be plastered on a big poster on the wall. Okay. And that's all beautiful. And they're really great words. And and it needs to involve, values and all the things. The key ingredient that's often missing is commitment. So now leadership needs to be committed to creating this. That is the hard part, because it's hard. I'm not going to lie. I mean, part of the difficulty, that I kind of started to get tired towards the end of my practice ownership was this constant creation of culture, constant. I would always call it my theory. I had this elevating the bar theory. And I would say, it's natural human tendency for, say you have the bar, it's at 100%, everybody's doing great. Over time, it's natural human tendency for that to slide down. People get slack, they get easy, they let up on the effort wheel a little bit. If the leaders are not constantly raising the bar, that 80% becomes the new normal. And that's fine. I mean, 80% is good, right? Well, now over time, we drop because now that 80% becomes the 100%. And now we drop. And we thought, well, they're still at 80%. It's now a new 80%. So, and then over time, we all hear about those practices that used to be great, and now they're not. Journey. It is a constant effort from leadership to be and stay committed to this vision. And they have to keep raising that bar. And I know for me, especially because I was, for a lot of it until later years when I had a manager, it felt like me against the world. It was exhausting. And I would always say, like, I have to be a pain in the ass. Like, I just have to, because that's my job. And if I don't keep raising the bar, we're going to become the practice that used to be good. And so, yes, I'm annoying right now. And yes, this is why you like working here, because I'm committed to maintaining what we have. And so that level of commitment obviously is harder as it gets bigger, but that's often the missing ingredient. And so behavior of the leadership is not consistent. Things are tolerated that are not consistent. And people, then they become victim to it. They throw their hands up. I just can't get the staff to do what I need them to do. And poor me, and the staff just all stink, and it is what it is. And they give up and they stop trying.
I think that paints such a realistic picture. I've experienced some of that personally, certainly seen it in, leaders and other, parts of my career. I can absolutely relate to everything you just said. And I'm guessing a lot of people can. And I love that the way that you explain that it is a constant job, constant labor of love, so to speak. And it is going to feel like you're constantly having to continue to raise that bar, which, sort of makes sense depending on what your role is. You have a lot invested there.
Yeah.
So of course a lot is going to fall to you. But I think it takes away this perception, or maybe not a perception, maybe this like wish that once I get to this place, then the culture is going to be good and we're just going to fire on all cylinders, and paints it in a realistic way. So when it does become that uphill battle, that slog where you're going, gosh, like here I am fighting the same battle again, or, here we slipped again and I'm having to hold people accountable, to say, that's not a bad thing. That's just part of the job when it comes to maintaining a certain culture. And that, I think, is empowering from a leadership perspective to, like you said, yes, I'm a pain. That's my job. I'm going to keep being a pain. Otherwise, everything's going to slip. And trust me, it'll be way worse than me being a pain right now. It's just it's almost like a breath of fresh air to be like, oh, yeah, that's normal. That's how it's supposed to feel. Okay.
Yeah, it is. And it's, and I would encourage any team members that are listening that perhaps experience that somebody being a pain, and understand that they're a pain because they love you. They're a pain because they want to hold you to your greatness. That's also, for me, part of a good leader and part of a great culture, is when leaders see the greatness in their people, regardless of what's present in behavior right now, and they hold them to that. Doesn't mean they hold them to perfectionism. That is a completely different thing. We do not expect that of anybody. We allow them their humanity, and we will elevate them beyond their insecurities, elevate them beyond where they think they can't, and elevate them beyond their BS stories that they're telling themselves, and say, no, I'm sorry. Like, you've been late 5 times. It's not acceptable. And you're better than that. That's not who I know you to be as an employee. Like, I'm just not going to take that from you because I know you're have more integrity than that. So it's that's just such a huge part of it. And some people find the process of life being a journey, or leadership being a journey, or personal growth, or whatever you're talking about, they almost in the beginning find that frustrating, because it's like, oh, so I have to keep working on this forever? Are you kidding me? Like you said, they want to like just get there and then everything's perfect and off you go. Well, think about that is actually an extremely disempowering context from which to operate. Because nothing can ever be perfect, you by definition can never get there. So as long as there is a there to get to, and you're not there because you can't be, you have failed. So by having a view of any form of growth and development be a destination, a person has automatically set themselves up for constant failure. Now, that is not a fun place to be. And I think, like you said, the perfectionist tendencies of veterinary professionals, I think that's a part of the burnout everybody experiences, because there's this constant experience of failure, whether medically, whether it's an interaction with a client, a team member, whatever. We're supposed to know everything, do everything, be everything. And we just can't be perfect in that all the time. So if there's, say for the doctors, if there's this one day I will arrive at the doctor that I will now be forever, this perfect doctor, you're always, I don't care if you practice till you're 85, you will always fall short of that. Therefore, you will always be a failure. And it's not true. Nobody's actually a failure. It's a story that people have in their minds. And it's so disempowering. And so, of course, people become burnt out. People become disengaged. They want to give up. They're exhausted, because trying to maintain that is exhausting. Whether it's from the perspective of a leader, a doctor, a team member, it doesn't matter. It is exhausting.
Right. Yeah. To say, I've been working and working and working for years and I still haven't accomplished my goal. It'll just take the wind out of your sails. I also think of it like accomplishing a big goal, also, somewhat from a disempowering perspective to say, let's say, I want to run a half marathon, and you run a half marathon, you're like, well, now what do I do? Whereas if it's this constant journey, you're never quite going to get there. There's always something to continue to work towards. There's always something that you can do better, do differently, work to be done, ways that things can continue to improve and get better, rather than, well, if it were to be this fictitious destination, okay, well, I got here, this is as good as it's ever going to get. Like, also doesn't sound like a fun place to be.
Yes. And at the same time, being careful to not have the dangling carrot syndrome. So people chasing the proverbial carrot, it's like, there, once I get the carrot, oh, now it moved, and they never can get anywhere. And so, yes, it's a journey, and there's never a place to arrive. And it's so important to stop and celebrate the wins along the way, to celebrate how far you've come in whatever it is that you're up to. So even if it's somebody, like you said, with running, which is a more measurable, concrete thing, like, yeah, you ran the half marathon. So now what? It's like, no, before the now what? You stop and you're like, wow, look what I did. Like, I can't believe, I never even ran before last year. And now look what I've accomplished because I put my mind to it. This is amazing. I'm going to celebrate. And now it's like, okay, now that I've done that, now what do I want to take on consciously? What now do I want to take on? Because I want to keep striving to improve. That being a conscious thought process and an intentional celebration and setting of a new goal is different than a default, I'm never good enough, constantly chasing the carrot, never getting to any place celebratable, just make up a word. And then the person just never, again, it's that hamster on a wheel, exhausted, burnt out. Why am I bothering? And of course they're going to feel that way. So I just encourage people to, no matter what you're up to, if you're in veterinary support, if you're in the front desk, I don't care what you're doing, think about your first day in vet med. Like you didn't know what a blocked cat was from a bloated dog. Like you had no idea of anything. And now you answer the phones and you triage. Like, okay, maybe you're not the supervisor yet, or maybe you don't know as much as Susie down the hallway, but look how much you've learned. And it's so important along the way to pause and acknowledge. That helps. I think that's part of what can help some aspects of burnout. Of course, that's another multifactorial issue.
That's conversation number 7 down there.
Right.
Because I was just thinking the same thing. I'm like, that's probably a piece of the burnout conversation too, of not celebrating the wins, of being in that constant striving mindset rather than, you use the word striving, and I loved the way that you used it, where you consciously striving to improve is different from, this striving mindset we talk about of which sounds like the dangling carrot syndrome that you're talking about.
Yes. One of a key distinction for me is perfectionism versus striving for excellence. Perfectionism is guaranteed failure. Perfectionism is one of the most disempowering contexts a person can put themselves into. It is a victim mentality because they're never good enough. Nothing's ever right. And, most people, you're just never going to find happiness there. You're never going to find peace. Never going to find joy. It's just because it's unattainable. However, a person's answer then might be, so am I supposed to just not care? Do I just not try to be really good at the surgery, or try not to produce more? Or no. Striving for excellence is what creates excellence. Because part of striving for excellence is also understanding and appreciating that setbacks are part of that journey, that mistakes are part of the journey. We look at errors or mistakes or setbacks as learning opportunities, growth opportunities versus failures that, send us into a cave. Now, we might go into our little hole for a day if something bad happens, but then we climb out and we learn and we grow from it. That is striving for excellence. It is very different from perfectionism. And I can tell you, in my opinion, if you were to take 2 doctors from graduation day, fast forward, I don't care, 8, 10, 15 years, the doctor who strives for excellence and allows for errors, mistakes, learning opportunities is going to be most likely a far more competent and superior doctor than the doctor that has been striving for excellence and therefore living in a state of failure for the last however many years.
Or striving for perfectionism and then and then continuing.
Yeah.
No, that makes sense of it, just kind of embracing, we talked about allowing people to have their humanity, also embracing our own humanity.
Yes.
So much of what you're talking about here is there's such an awareness component, this like conscious way of thinking about things, of approaching things and trying to accomplish, sort of defined goals goals of, I use that term loosely since we're talking about culture and things like that. So I want to dive into that a little bit further, because I'm picturing this, okay, like this is making a lot of sense to me. I've got this vision for workplace culture, and we're going to talk about it as a team, and we're on board, and every single person is contributing. We know what's going on. Well, I'm imagining, kind of like we're talking about here, this is something we individually, of course, have to keep up with and continue to elevate the bar like you talked about. We also need our team to continue to show up and embody those values, that culture every day. So how do we, as leaders and then as team members, continue to strive for excellence, so to speak, to continue to try to embody this culture that we're trying to create without having, because I've also seen it where I felt like I've fallen into the trap of going to, 13 meetings that all could have been emails, and okay, we're going to talk about it, but I always wonder in those scenarios, like, how much are we moving forward? So right. I guess the question being, how do we kind of look at this in a productive manner where we're continuing to move towards that goal on our journey?
The first thing that comes to my mind, it all relates back to what I said earlier. and that's commitment. Again, starting with leadership. Part of this is being committed to, for a leader, for your own growth and development, and for that of your team. Most people will struggle with shifting their behavior because they don't have the self-awareness needed to do so. They might be aware that they want to, and they might really want to, and they try. And then when they don't, they get frustrated. Like, oh, I just snapped at my team again. Oh, why do I keep doing that? Right. And then they feel bad about themselves because they don't understand why they're behaving the way they're behaving, and they don't understand how to shift it. So many efforts at changing things like culture are to the fault of nobody. People just don't know, but they're focused on changing behavior. Behavior is the end of a line of factors that go towards creating a result. So if you look at an outcome or a result, the behavior immediately precedes that result. However, there are multiple things before the behavior. If we don't take steps back and teach people how to understand how they are showing up, how they're experiencing life, their perceptions, how you perceive things and how you interpret things is what creates your thoughts. Your thoughts create your feelings and your emotions, right? Like if I don't have a thought that you were mean when you just said something, I'm not going to be angry. If you're like, Jennifer, I hate you. And I could laugh at that, right? Because I have a thought like, oh, she's joking, right? But if I have a thought like, she's so mean, who is she? Then I'm going to feel angry, right? So our thoughts are what create our feelings. And then our feelings create our actions, right? If I'm laughing because you're funny, or if I'm angry because you just hurt my feelings, my behavior that follows is going to be very different, right? Whatever my behavior is going to create my outcomes. If we ignore all of the preceding steps and we try to shift behavior, it doesn't work. It's like strong arming ourselves into behavior changes, which can happen temporarily, but they don't last because what's driving our behavior is not in the realm of awareness. It's often subconscious. And unless people are given training and tools and resources to help bring that to light, and they go, oh my gosh, I see that now. Or, hey, I'm heading into a meeting, or I have to have a conversation with my coworker. Or my initial thought was to get angry because she left that mess. But nobody would say this, I'm proverbial. They say, but I have the awareness now to say, is that anger really going to serve anybody? Why don't I just clean it up and help her out? Right? So when people can start to become aware of their own behavior and what they're doing and what they're thinking, that's when they can start to shift. That's why New Year's resolutions don't work. They're like, well, once the certain date happens, I'm going to change my behavior. I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to stop smoking. I'm going to be nicer to my kids. Well, good luck with that. About 8% of New Year's resolutions are achieved because shifting behavior without focusing on anything else doesn't work. And so then the leaders get frustrated because they can't change their own behavior. The staff get frustrated, and it just becomes this, experience of, like we said earlier, inauthenticity, lip service, and then everybody gives up.
Yeah, because
and it is what it is.
Yeah, that we're just talking about, but nothing's actually changing and nothing's actually getting accomplished. I said in the first conversation we had when we started talking, I was like, did you talk to my therapist before we got this? Because I'm relating to a lot of what you're saying. And it does have to do with like I think there are a few experiences that are more humbling than, reflecting on your own behavior in the form, for me, it's the form of therapy and whatever form works for you, to really say, you think like, oh, I'm, kind of have my stuff together. Like on paper, I'm a pretty successful, well-adjusted person. And then, man, you dive in and you're like, oh gosh, there's so much here. And it does create a different level of awareness to where, you can start to see oh, I'm mad at this person because they didn't clean up the mess after placing an IV catheter. Well, am I really mad about that, which will take me 30 seconds to clean up? Or am I mad because my kids left their stuff all over the hallway this morning and I had to clean it up and I'm just tired and I'm tired of cleaning up people's messes? But it takes a certain amount of self-reflection. I think, at least for me,
Yes.
there's a healthy dose of humility in there as well.
Yeah.
So, how do people get started on that journey of self-reflection to understand how their perceptions are influencing their thoughts, are influencing their behaviors, and then their final outcomes?
Okay. So there's many different ways. And so just to comment on the example you just gave, yes, it could be they're upset because the child left the toys in the hallway or whatever. And even deeper than that, they could be upset about the mess because they have an underlying story that they've had since they're 8 years old that nobody cares about them, or that their time is not as valuable, or that nobody respects me.
They're only valuable for what they can help with and serve.
So then both the child's toys in the hallway and the IV catheter mess both made them angry because of whatever subconscious story is present, which I can guarantee you is affecting a lot more of life than just getting upset about a couple of messes. So those are the things that, when brought to the surface, provide tremendous opportunity and possibility for people when they get that stuff out of their way. It's mind-boggling how powerful that is. So some ways that people can do this. I mean, you mentioned therapy is one, and that's very valuable, particularly for people who have maybe some things from their past that they are having trouble healing from. Maybe some trauma, which unfortunately a lot of people have. Especially if there's anything like substance abuse present, clinical depression, suicidal tendencies, like anything like that is all definitely, I would highly recommend anybody seek a therapist. What I do is coaching, which is different than therapy. And you maybe inadvertently got a little experience of that during our last call. In coaching, and there's different methodologies of coaching, the type of coaching that I do is it's kind of like questioning in a way. Like you said, you felt like you were being interviewed, and I wasn't necessarily really coaching you, but it just ended up that way. And it's asking a series of questions to help somebody dive in and find their own answers, right? Because nobody has your answers for you. Every person has all the answers they need within them already. And nobody's exempt from that. Like, it's not like, oh, well, she's lucky. She has her answers. Poor me, I don't. No, everybody does. It's just most of us are not trained to have awareness and access to that. Why do I get so mad every time they leave that catheter mess? I wish, why can't I just not care? Like, every time she walks by and she sees a mess, she just cleans it up and she's smiling and singing and off she goes. Why can't I just be more like her? And then it becomes that there's something wrong with me. There's something deficient about me. No, she has her own version of whatever you have. And this is one thing I cannot express strongly enough to every single person listening to this. Everybody has their stuff. Well, usually we use a different word starting with an S, right? Like we all have it. If you're human, you've got it. Most people hide it. Their little secret, their insecurities, their stories, their beliefs, how am I not good enough? Nobody likes me. I'm not smart enough. Everything I do fails. You could go on and on and on. There's 1,000 different versions. It's all totally normal. It's part of the human experience. And our minds are not designed to see it. So what we keep doing is we try to think our way through it. We keep trying this and trying that and trying and nose to the grindstone until we give up, because your mind can't see what's hiding in the background running the show. So to answer your question, there's many different ways you can work with a coach like myself who goes deep with people, and and team trainings and of the same light can help with culture development, things like that. There are lots of books out there, weekend programs, retreats. I mean, it's a journey. I can't tell you how many hundreds of different programs I've done in my life. Coaches, I've worked with so many different coaches. I'm working with a coach right now. I always have a coach at any given time. So the journey is a choice, and it's not mandatory. The question is, what do you want for your life? And that's a question to ask yourself every day. What do I want for my life? Is this it? Is this not it? And if the answer is the latter, then my suggestion is to say, this doesn't work for me. I'm going to shift things. I don't know how. I have no clue how. That's okay. That's normal. And start the process of seeking resources, seeking help, whatever form interests an individual. Nobody can do it for you. So that's where I would suggest beginning. Like I said, many different choices. But the first step is to make the choice to do it. And it's an individual thing. And it's the one thing I can guarantee you, or not you, like anybody, is that you can name the people who are annoying. You can name the people that drive you crazy at home, at work, the clients, the team members, the family, whatever, the friend. As long as your happiness, your peace, your joy, your fulfillment, any of the above is dependent on that person changing or leaving, you are giving away your power. And good luck, because you're going to sit there with your proverbial fingers crossed, hoping they change. Hope is not a strategy, and they're not going to change. So now what? What are you committed to? It's like we talked about for culture. It's the same thing for somebody's own life. You need to get committed. What does that look like? What do you want to create? And from there, you'll find what you need. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. It does. Yes. And I'm also thinking, not to pick out like one thing you said, because there was so much gold there. But talking about, when you're like, I can't tell you how many different programs and things that I've done. I love that you said that, because I'm in the same boat. Like I love reading different books, and looking at things from different perspectives, and I get something different out of each one of those experiences. And that's been something that's been really eye-opening for me is, it's almost like in diving into self-reflection in general and understanding kind of what makes you tick and what those internal stories are that you might not even be aware of. There have been times where I've felt like, okay, I figured that out. Let me close the chapter on that. That one, check that box off, move on to the next one.
Right.
And inevitably, however long later, you're right back there. But from a different perspective. It looks different. You're considering it from a different way. It's affecting you in a different way. That was really hard for me to wrap my head around. And I don't mean to like go down my own little like therapy rabbit hole here, but that was hard because and it goes back to what we were talking about in the beginning about culture. To say, no, I did that. I checked it off. If I'm back here again, then I must have failed. I must have done it incorrectly. Instead to say like, none of these things really ever like, it's not like you check them off and you can put them away and never visit them again. But the fact that it looks different, that you have a different perspective, it's affecting you in a different way, like that's part of that journey, that's part of that progress, and just kind of continuing to I don't know, embrace the challenges that come your way and the frustration that can come with having to rewrite that story multiple times.
Yeah. The stuff, the stories, the garbage that, holds us back, blocks us. It's all just different versions of our, put this in air quotes, our truth about ourselves and about the world, which it's truth with a lowercase t. It is not the truth. It is our truth. It's our stories. And I always say everything's true until it's not. And as we cultivate awareness, we develop new truths that often are more empowering. It gets ourselves out of our own way. And for the most part, a lot of that stuff never fully leaves. And when people first start down the journey, I think you hit on such an important concept, is they can get so frustrated. They might go to some program or work with a coach or therapist and have this big breakthrough and cry and, oh my gosh, I had no idea that I had abandonment issues because of my dad when I was 5. And okay, I'm glad I figured that out. Now that's out of my way. Nope. And so then all of a sudden it rears its ugly head again, and they think, oh my God, all that work I did was for nothing. It's not for nothing. It's kind of like layers. And this is why it's a journey. And you discover the same things over and over again. You hear things in a different way. You see new aspects of it. And at the same time, these things weaken. So the fact that they're still there doesn't mean that they're as powerful as they were. Because here's the thing. When somebody has no awareness of it at all, I always say, does it have you or do you have it? When a person's just right now going to work every day, no idea that something like that is present, it completely has them. It is running the show. It is controlling their life. It is completely affecting every perception and thought of how they're experiencing their reality. As those doors of awareness start to creak and crack open and more expand, those beliefs get stronger, get weaker. They're not as strong. You become aware of them much quicker and you go, oh, there it is. No, thank you. And you push it out of the way. So they stay for shorter periods of time. They're not as intense and you notice them. And so then I say, it's still there, but now you have it. And so there's certain things that we also have that benefit us, but it benefits us a little. So we can use it when it benefits us. And when it doesn't, we can say no. I always say, no, thank you. And I push it out of the way and it rides alongside of you instead of in front of your face as the way you see the world. And until a person actually experiences it even a little bit, these concepts may seem somewhat abstract or like not attainable. And the one thing I can assure everybody is that it is attainable if you decide that you want it. It is nothing that can be imposed on anybody. And that's where commitment to culture, circling back to our topic, that's where commitment to culture comes in, right? So if you have a commitment to how things are going to be and you provide your staff with the training, with the resources they need to truly shift how they're showing up and not just telling them to change their behavior, which they can't do or maybe can't do. There might be that person or two in there, and it might be your lead vet, your lead surgical tech, who is committed to their misery and is committed to their anger and is committed to showing up in a not so great way every day. And part of your commitment to your culture needs to be bigger than your commitment to having your best surgery tech. Because when we tolerate that which doesn't work, we say we're committed to the culture, but we're not. We're bigger committed to something else. So it's not to immediately give up on that person. Maybe that person, once they actually feel safe, once that person sees, wow, management really means it. When we have these meetings and they say, oh, we're going to do this and that, and everybody sits there and rolls their eyes and says, yeah, right, I'll believe it when I see it. When they actually start to see it, because leadership is authentically showing up how they say they're going to show up, maybe that guard comes down a little. Maybe the fear that's driving that behavior, because that kind of behavior is always driven by fear. Maybe when that fear starts to lessen, the behavior will start to lessen. So you always give people the chance, always give them that opportunity. And sometimes difficult choices need to be made if you're committed to your culture. No right or wrong. It's what do you want? What do you want to create? Right?
Yes. And again, so empowering to say, the the world is your oyster. The future is in your hands. You can decide how you want that to look, whether it's from a leadership perspective or, as a team member, how you're going to show up every day and the role that you're going to play in your workplace culture or, in wherever it is that you eventually end up, that it's really, we have so much control over that in all of the different roles that we play.
Yep.
My goodness, Jennifer, Dr. Edwards, this has been such an amazing conversation. Again, I feel like I got my own little personal coaching session. And so I hope everybody listening will feel that way as well. I guess I would kind of wrap up here with two things. One would be, if people are feeling inspired after listening to this and they want to find you, how do they find you? And two would be, is there an overarching takeaway that you say, if you got nothing else from this, take this away from this conversation?
Okay. Yes. So if people would like to find me, they can find me at my website, which is simply drjenniferedwards.com with a DR for doctor. I'm also on LinkedIn, Facebook, all the platforms. And my handle everywhere is just at Dr. Jennifer Edwards. So feel free to follow me, connect with me, message me. I'm always happy to connect with people. And if people are interested in this type of work, whether it's private coaching, team training, practice culture audits, anything like that, through my website, they can set up a connection call where we can discuss whether it would look right to work together. If I were to say one takeaway, this is always my takeaway, no matter what the topic is that we're talking about, because without this, everything else is completely irrelevant. And it's what we talked about just a little bit ago. And that is taking 100% responsibility for your life. Without that, you are giving away your power, and achieving anything that you want to create is going to be very frustrating and very difficult. It does not mean everything's your fault. It doesn't mean you need to change people. It means you say, this, that, or the other thing is not working in my life. I'm not happy. How can I be responsible? What choices am I making? Have I made? What choices can I make? What conversations can I have? What am I putting up with or tolerating? It needs to start inside of the own person, finding your answers within, being responsible and not blaming others. That's the number one golden nugget for happiness.
Man, that is a good one. I have so many thoughts on that, and I'm going to keep them to myself. Otherwise, we'll just go off on another tangent, because that's open to so much interpretation that I think that's the perfect place to leave it with people, and it can resonate on so many levels wherever somebody may be in their journey towards trying to get some of these answers. So, Jennifer, thank you so much for joining me. This has been such a great talk. I've enjoyed it immensely, and I hope you're serious when we talk about these other conversations we need to have, because I would love to have you back on and kind of continue down this road.
Absolutely. This was so much fun, and I would be more than happy to come back at any time. And I think we'd have a hard time picking from our list of 20, but we'll find another juicy topic for people. And and I always encourage people, if there's things you want to hear about, reach out to speakers, podcast hosts, whatever. Always give people your feedback. What do you want to hear and learn about? We'll talk about it. So
absolutely. Yes, I love that message too, because yes, very serious with the end of the episode when I list contact information. Yes, reach out to me, reach out to Dr. Edwards. Let us know, what you want to hear, and yeah, we'll go down those rabbit holes and talk about those too.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for coming on. Well, thank you so much to everyone for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed that episode. I know I certainly did. And if you're ready to dive deeper into conscious leadership, or you're looking to make some changes in your practice, I would really encourage you to check out the resources that Dr. Edwards offers on her website. In case you missed it there at the end, it is drdrjenniferedwards.com. Jennifer, thank you so much for joining me. I've enjoyed both of our conversations so far. I get so much out of it every time we talk. So thank you again for coming on the show, and I hope we can continue the conversation on another episode. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcast to help other veterinary professionals like you find this and other great content we try to put out there. You can also explore more episodes by clicking on the Education tab on the VetFolio website or finding us wherever you get your podcasts. We're always eager to hear your thoughts and ideas for future episodes. Feel free to reach out to me at dvm@vetfolio.com. We can connect on Facebook at Dr. Cassi DVM, or you can follow me on Instagram at dr.cassi.dvm. And remember, if one animal is better off because of you today, it's a great day.